Hey everybody, welcome to the November's EMT, and we got some good ones for you today. Today we're going to talk about infection control, and I love talking about this one just because it is so much fun to delve into the ins and outs of the human body and to kind of see people's faces when you start talking about some of the weird diseases and things like that that's out there, and you kind of get to see some of the germaphobes' face. So I can't wait to get started with this. Let's jump on in here. All right, so here are our objectives. We're going to talk about bloodborne pathogens, what they are, what they do, what they look like. We're going to talk about the risk that we have as first responders to bloodborne pathogens, things like that. We're going to talk about the exposure control plan and all these other things that you see up here. I'm not going to read every slide to you, but if you can't tell, I am excited. I don't have a co-host today, unfortunately, so I'm a little bit lonely, but it's okay. I'm gonna try my best to make this as engaging as possible to you. I hope that you guys learned some things, and I really did a lot of little research into this, and I hope that I can bring something new to it. I know we do these slides every single year. I get it, but I really do hope that I can bring something new to the table, at least get you to see something from a different perspective. All right, so let's talk about the whole thing of our infection control and our training and stuff like that. We really got on the map back in the early 80s when the HIV virus came onto the scene. And when it came onto the scene, I mean, man, it really caught everybody by surprise. Nobody really knew what to think about it. And unfortunately, it was all relegated to, just one certain population. And that's just how we treated it for a long time. But then you started to see a shift in it. We started seeing other people that didn't fit the mold of what we were told at the time, that they didn't fit that mold of the people who had it. And one of the most notable ones, at least the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, is going to be Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson, when he came out and said that he had HIV, it changed the whole dynamic and the whole conversation about the disease itself, because now it's no longer something that was kind of kept in the shadows and it was just, associated with one type of lifestyle. Now we're seeing that basically anybody could get it, and that was the turning point for the conversation on the HIV virus. So fast forward quite a few years, excuse me, nothing really changed. We didn't really get anything new per se. And then when 2014 hit, bam, we had something that we had thought was completely eradicated in the civilized world, quote unquote civilized world. And we had the Ebola virus outbreak. Now, does anybody remember back in the day, or not back in the day, but about 2014, somewhere around there, where the people came from overseas and they flew into the Texas International Airport and they actually had the virus? When that came out, I mean, man, it was nonstop news coverage. They shut down that entire airport for what was it, like a week, almost 2 weeks, and everybody was scared because we were thinking like, oh my God, here it is. We're about to have a disease that just it ravishes countries. We're about to have that back here in this country. And that was really scary. That was really scary, and honestly, it was very humbling at the time because we really had to pay attention to a lot of things that we really did take for granted. So we got through that, and the opportune word there is we got through it. If nothing else, we get through things as a people, as a nation. We get through things. So we got through that. Fast forward a couple years, and then that's when the Mosquito Squad was making money like gangbusters because we had this big scare about Zika. Zika was definitely something that we were concerned about because Zika was the equivalent to a silent assassin. Zika did not show itself until you had kids, and that's what made Zika so doggone dangerous because Zika didn't care about the current generation. Zika wanted to take out future generations, and that's what made that virus just so strong and so deadly. So again, we had to change up our infection control protocols. We had to change up our training, our thought process. All these types of things have shaped what you're learning today because we try to take where we've been and we try to add to it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get some basics down. So first things first, what are bloodborne pathogens? Now, bloodborne pathogens, they're just these little pains in the butts that we get that can make you very sick if you're not careful. But we give them a bigger platform than what we should, because honestly, a lot of these things can be taken care of with good hygiene. If we would just wash our hands, not cough and sneeze on everybody, clean up surfaces, things like that, a lot of these diseases, they're just nothing really, and we're going to go through some of them, and we're going to talk about some of their strengths and weaknesses. And my hope is to kind of demystify some of these common diseases that we train on all the time, and to get you guys to see just how, you know honestly, how not scary they really can be if we take the proper precautions. So we're going to talk about things like hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HIV. We'll go back over, I believe we'll go back over Zika and Ebola towards the end, but we're just going to touch on some of them. So buckle up, hold on tight, let's have some fun. All right. So when we're talking about infectious diseases, we need to know that there are just different types of, I guess, not diseases, but there's different organisms, different cells, okay? Not everything is a virus, not everything is a bacteria, and not everything is a spore, but they're out there. And what we typically do is we like to lump everything into one category. We basically want to call everything a virus, when it's honestly not. The thing that makes a virus is that it has to have a host. Viruses, in and of themselves, are basically just carriers of information. That's all they are. A virus is kind of like a it's kind of like a flash drive. The flash drive in and of itself is nothing. It just holds information in, and that information means nothing to us until we plug it into the computer. The same thing is with the virus. The virus by itself is pretty much worthless until it finds a host and it can it can upload its information into that host cells. When the information is uploaded into the cells, that's when you have a problem. But a virus just being on a tabletop or something like that, clothing, it's nothing really, and it doesn't last long. And we're going to talk about that. Some prime examples of viruses are going to be the flu, the Ebola, COVID-19, all these things like this. And again, we have to remember that in and of themselves, they are not that dangerous, okay? The virus has to have time to get into the system. It has to have time to germinate. It has to upload its information into your system. All these things like that, they take time, but we have a great defense against them, and that's basic hygiene. Basic hygiene, washing your hands, covering your mouth when you cough or sneeze, cleaning common surfaces. All these things, I know they sound super rudimentary, and you get tired of hearing them on the news every single day, but it's the truth. If we just clean up after ourselves, we can head off a lot of these problems. The next thing is bacteria. Bacteria, they like to live on surfaces just a little bit longer, and by themselves, they still have their own unique threats with them. Some examples of bacteria would be strep throat, a UTI. We've all seen patients who suffer from those. Food poison. Bacterias, they take just a little bit different types of cleaning, but we're still cleaning. You might have to put a little bit of elbow grease extra into it, because bacteria likes to hide, and that's the interesting thing about them. They like to get into the real deep nooks and crannies, and they like to hide because they are survivalists. That's what bacteria does. It knows that you don't want it, so it has to kind of tuck itself away so that it can try to live to fight another day. And then, last but not least, you have the fungi or fungi, fungi. I think I'm saying the right, fungi. But you have simple examples of that, like athlete's foot or like a yeast infection. Now, the thing about this one is that this one, if you allow it to grow and multiply enough, you can physically see the fungi or the fungus itself. You can't see a virus without a microscope. You can't see bacteria without a microscope, for the most part. But fungi, you can actually see that. And fungus is, they're just, what we have here is that they're spore producing molecules. What does that mean? Basically, spore producing molecule means is that it reproduces itself by breaking little pieces of itself off and lets it kind of, float through the air, for lack of a better term, so that it can go to another another area, make a home, make a family. It grows, and then they break off again. So those are real generalizations when it comes to the different types of diseases. Not diseases. I'm sorry. The different type of disease carriers that we have. So we have viruses, we have bacteria, and we have fungi. Okay, here's just a little history when it comes to pandemics and some infectious diseases. This is good information to look over when you have time. But again, this information right here, this just really goes to show that we get through this. As a people, we will get through this. We're definitely going to take some bumps and bruises, but we will get through this. We will be stronger, and we'll know better. We'll know better for next time. Okay, so let's get into this. Let's talk about our first bloodborne pathogen, and that's going to be Hep B. Hep B is a pretty dangerous thing because Hep B, if we're looking at the ranking, I would say the ranking from uh, most threatening to least, I would put Hep B up there on at least in the top, somewhere towards the top. Okay, I don't know. We'll say top five, just arbitrary number. But I'm gonna say that, and the reason being is because Hep B is a fighter. It is a survivalist, and Hep B does not go down easy. Let's put it in comparison to one that we think is the big bad wolf in the room, HIV. Okay, HIV, when compared to Hep B, it is this little brother. It's this little kid brother, 2 years old or something. And the reason being is because HIV can only live outside of a host under pristine conditions. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But Hep B can live outside the host in just about any condition for quite a while. HIV, we're talking about a couple of hours. Hep B, we're talking about up to a week. So there's a big difference in the resilience of these two diseases right here. So that's why I say that this one is pretty dangerous. Now, again, it can be taken down if we clean stuff. So don't make no mistake. I'm not trying to make something seem worse than what it is. I'm looking at it from a strictly scientific virus disease perspective. But we can take care of all that stuff with good cleaning and good hygiene. That's going to be the moral of the story for the day if you haven't learned that. Good hygiene, good cleaning. All right, let's move on to Hep C because Hep B and Hep C, they are actually very similar. They both end up affecting the liver, and they can both shut down your liver. And the telltale sign of that is going to be jaundice. If anybody forgot, jaundice is when you have your eyes start to turn yellow because you have bilirubin that's been built up in your system, and it's just not a good thing because eventually your liver will fail, and that's what you pass from. Personal note, my sister actually passed away from one of the hepatitis. I'm not sure which one it was. I was too young to really know about it. But this stuff right here, it is serious. So what's the big deal? I don't know if it's Hep B, Hep C. How can I tell the difference? Well, I'm glad you asked. Okay. Hep B is transmitted. Ooh, that was country. Did you hear that? Is transmitted through contact with somebody's bodily fluids. Hep C is transmitted when you contact somebody's blood. So the way that I remember is Hep B. B is for bodily fluids, and then you got Hep C is the other one. So you have blood to blood contact. Again, all these things right here, they're dangerous in their own right, but we can take care of them with some soap and water. And we're going to talk about why soap and water is more effective statistically than just straight alcohol gels. The alcohol gel is good, don't get me wrong, but we're going to talk about what makes soap and water the reigning champion. Okay, next, let's get into the HIV. Now, HIV is something, like I said, man, gosh, at one point in time, this thing was the worst thing ever. If somebody got HIV, we wrote them off as that they were going to be dead. They had moments to live, and of course I'm exaggerating, but they didn't have long to live. They were going to die, and it was just the end of the world. Now, it is a dangerous thing. It can definitely wreak havoc in your body, and basically it shuts down your immune system. So something as simple as a cold will take you out of this world. But once we got over ourselves, and instead of looking at the how is contracted, we started looking at the what. What is it? What does this virus do? How is it made up? How are things going on? Once we got over ourselves and we started looking at the what, we actually found out that HIV, again, if we're looking at it from a virus standpoint, it is not that big of a deal when it comes to protecting oneself from it. So, one thing that we learned is that HIV is such a fragile virus. It can't live outside of a host for very long. We're talking about a couple of hours, and anything like direct UV light can kill it. If we change the pH balance of the surface that is on, that'll kill it. Time will kill it. HIV is pretty fragile. So, when we look at it from a virus standpoint, this one right here is not that bad. We can take care of this way faster, way easier than we can some of the other viruses and diseases that we're going to talk about today. So as long as we keep our wits about us, we're good. Now, unfortunately, HIV, once you got it, you got it. Okay, we don't have a quote unquote cure for it. Now we do have drugs that have been shown to reduce your virus count. I'm sorry, your white blood cell count and your virus count. It reduces all the things that the virus needs. It reduces it to the point to where they say that you are undetectable. So when you are undetectable on that spectrum, then technically you can't transmit it. Now you still have it, but you can't transmit it. One of the ones that has been making a lot of news lately is going to be Big Tarby. I'm sure we've all seen the commercial, and you know, I think that's pretty cool that we have grown to the point to where we can actually we can actually do something about it. Gone are the days are gone are the days of the super expensive drug cocktails. I know we've all heard about that, where they're taking 4 or 5 pills a day, and now we're to the point to where if we catch it early enough, you can go down to 1 pill. And it's not that expensive, I'm assuming, because lots of people have been talking praises about it. So it must be somewhere on the affordable spectrum somewhere. But I think that just shows a lot of growth. Now, so what's the big deal? Why is it that we can't find a cure for HIV? Well, I'm glad you asked, because it's actually pretty interesting. And when we're looking at it from a virus standpoint, I just have to keep making sure that we understand it. I just want to make sure don't nobody misunderstand me. We're looking at it from a virus standpoint. This is one of the most ingenious viruses that I've ever been able to research and look at, because this thing right here, it literally acts like a key into a lock. So without getting too deep in it, if you just imagine that your cells are there, your cells have a key slot, just like any lock, like you want to go into the house or something like that. It has a key slot. The HIV virus has mutated and has made itself to where when it enters your body, it learns your body and it cuts a key to enter to your cells, so that when the virus tries to latch onto a cell, it literally fits perfect in there, and it pushes the key into the tumbler, and then it unlocks your cell. Now, as far as I know, there aren't many viruses or another virus that interacts with your cells that way. I could be wrong, but I think that is just amazing, because I mean that takes some craftsmanship right there. Um, so once the virus unlocks your cell, what does it do? Well, again, we learned earlier that viruses, they can't live without a host, and all they are technically just carriers. So what the virus does is it unlocks your cell, and then it downloads all this information into your cell, and it puts it uploads itself, or downloads. I don't know which one that would be. It downloads. Yes, it downloads itself into your body. And now your body has the recipe for that virus forever in the system. It actually goes into the RNA, the ribonucleic acid. Okay. So what does that mean? So, why do we care that it goes into the RNA? The RNA is the instructions that your body uses in order to make new cells and to replicate and fix things. So if this virus puts itself into the actual instruction manual of your body, I mean, come on, it there's no way to get that out of your system like that, because now it's in the code. It's in your genetic code. It's in your step 1, step 2. Your body is going to read the RNA every time it wants to make a new cell or fix something, it's going to read that RNA, those instructions, and every single time it's going to just keep creating that HIV virus with it. I mean, as a kind of like a science geek nerd, I really think that is amazing. Again, this is a bad disease to have in your life, but wow, that's pretty interesting. So with that being said, does that mean that everybody can get AIDS? Because it gets into your system and then it learns your system. It makes the key so they can unlock your cell. Actually, no. Now, there is a person. He is unfortunately passed away now. I don't know what he passed away from, but his name was Stephen Lyon Crone. He was a British man, and I learned about him years and years ago because I thought that it was very interesting what his special ability was in life. Stephen Crone was a walking X-Man. He had a genetic mutation. His mutation was a Delta 32 genetic mutation, and his mutation actually made him completely immune from HIV. His cells could not be infected with HIV. And you want to know why? It's because his locks, if we're going to use an analogy, his locks were installed backwards. So when the virus when it goes into his system, it can't find the tumbler. It can't find the tumbler to put his key in so that it can learn to cut the key in the right way. His cells were just completely backwards. So he was actually immune from the HIV virus. I really thought that was just absolutely amazing because it was like, wow, again, we can get through these things. We can get through these diseases. We have people that are being born that have antibodies, that have special genes that make them resistant to this. And when they reproduce and have kids and stuff, then these kids are going to have these traits. And over time, things are going to keep spreading out, and eventually, we'll be immune to things. We'll be stronger against things, and that's what's so amazing about the human race, that we adapt so well. So I thought that was really cool. If you're more interested, Lord, I'm thinking this. If you're interested more, if you're more interested, well, if you want to know more, I think that's how it's supposed to go. If you want to know more about Stephen Crone, his name is Stephen Lyon Crone. And I really encourage you guys to look him up. I think that you'll learn a lot by hearing his story. All right, so let's talk about the next thing. Right here, it's kind of a pretty much cut and dry slide. But let's talk about the Zika virus and the Ebola virus real quick. Let's kind of demystify them because, uh, like I said earlier, Zika virus was the equivalent to an assassin. It was a silent assassin. The Zika virus, when you were bitten by a mosquito, you got a vector-borne disease. That Zika virus got into your system, and the Zika was like, you know what? I'm going to relax. I'm going to wait for a while. So I'm going to set up in either the sperm or in the ovaries, depending on which one you have. And I'm not going to do anything until it's time to procreate. So when the infected person was infected with Zika, they didn't really have any signs and symptoms. They might get a little cold or something like that, but it goes away. After that, they really didn't know that they had anything. The only time that they knew that they had it, if they didn't get tested, of course, was when they had a child and their child was born with pinhead syndrome. I think it's called microcephalopathy. So basically, imagine the Coneheads, the movie The Coneheads. I think that's Dan Aykroyd or something like that. Imagine that, but on a much smaller scale. So what this virus did is that it stopped the development of your skull cap. So basically, you're asking a brain to develop in a area that's way too small. So now the body is still going to grow, but the body has to decide what it can do in the small finite space that it has available to it. So think about it this way: as the brain is trying to develop, it's trying to grow, and now it's running out of space. So now the brain has to make a decision: do I want to know how to breathe, or do I want to know how to run? Of course, it's going to pick breathing. Do I want to know how to um, Do I want to know how to chew and swallow, or do I want to know how to sing? You see what I'm saying? The brain had to make decisions on what was necessary for it to survive and to live in its circumstances. So that's why the microcephalopathy or pinhead syndrome is so dangerous, because it did not allow the brain to develop. And think about it this way: if your brain can't develop, you're not going to live that long, and then you can't have kids. So in essence, you could have a whole generation be wiped out if enough people contract this disease. So that was one of the big reasons why Zika was so scary to us, because when you look at it from a virus standpoint and from just uh, a I guess potential standpoint, this virus right here had the ability to wipe out a whole generation, a whole nation, if it wanted to, if it got bad enough. So that's why we really jumped into action as hard as we could when we saw the whole Zika thing. Next one, Ebola. Ebola was one of those ones that we always saw it in the textbooks. We never really thought about what Ebola really was, and all we usually see are just going to be those pictures of the people with the black boils and the rotting away flesh. Basically Z Nation. That's all we saw, with pictures of people reenacting Z Nation stuff. But what is Ebola? Ebola is a hemorrhagic disease. It's something that causes you to bleed just spontaneously. You just start to bleed. Now, if you're proactive with it and you can, drain the blood and things like that, I don't think it can get out of hand. I think that it can be manageable, and I think that you can live long enough to possibly, be cured of it, or without too much damage to you. But the problem is that when the body starts to just randomly bleed, sometimes you don't see where the blood is pooling up. And on average, the human blood cells, red blood cells, they last for about 5 days. So when we have this buildup of blood in different pockets of the body and things like that, eventually those cells are going to die if they're not drained out. The blood cells are going to die. And when you have dead blood cells, dead anything in the body, what happens? You start to get a release of toxins and waste that build up in the body, and then those toxins start to affect the living good tissue, and then that causes that tissue to die, and then it's just a vicious cycle that goes on. So that's the problem with Ebola. That cycle, the cells are constantly killing other cells that it comes in contact with, and eventually you see those Z Nation cast members that we see on the in the textbook when we're looking at pictures of Ebola people. So they have those deep pockets of sores, they have the flesh that's rotting off and all that kind of stuff, and it's all because the blood cells have died in that area, and now the dead cells are releasing the toxins which are going to kill the other cells. So those are those two viruses. Again, from a geek perspective, I think it's very interesting to see how those things work. Okay, so we've talked about a few of them. Let's talk about our risk of exposure with it. Now, there are quite a few different contamination sources. You see them on the screen there. Blood, other potentially infectious materials like body fluids, tissues, open wounds, things like that. Anything that we can come in contact with, that most of us come in contact with on a shift by shift basis. Any of those things could be carrying any disease. So what do we do? The moral of the story is PPE, PPE, PPE. And I know that we all, everybody, including myself, at some point in time before the whole COVID thing came about, we all became lax on it. Typically we were thinking about PPE, we just slapped some gloves on. But if we're honest with ourselves, there are a lot of things out there that can really mess us up. So we need to keep that in our mind. Of course, we're wearing our mask because one, is a GOG. We're supposed to be doing it, but we're wearing our mask now. We need to make sure that we're still getting our gloves on, and something as simple as just washing up a little bit after a call. Maybe the patient was coughing. We don't know if they had COVID or anything like that, but I got coughed on. Let me change my clothes. Let me go ahead and wash my hands, wash up a little bit, just to try to head off any potential. Okay. So the moral of the story is PPE. When we're talking about exposure, we have different types of exposure. We have direct, indirect, respiratory, and vector-borne transmission. So direct contact is simple. You just come in contact with an exposed part of somebody's body. Okay, whether it be an open wound or I don't know, you come in some physical contact with them. Indirect contact is going to be that you have come in contact with a contaminated object. So direct contact, you came in contact with a person. Indirect contact, you come in contact, Lord, that's a lot of contacts, with an infected object. So we're talking about maybe a doorknob, or if you go to the nursing homes when they have C. diff or MRSA infections, bed sheets, you've come in contact with those. Those are indirect contacts. Respiratory transmission is pretty self-explanatory. Somebody coughs or sneezes, and excuse me, that stuff is going to be up in the atmosphere for a little while because not everything falls to the ground immediately, and you just inhale it, and there you go. That's your transmission. And last but not least, you have vector-borne. So vector-borne is pretty much anything that is transmitted by something piercing the skin. So whether it be a needle or it is I think those things are called proboscises, or the nose of a mosquito. If it pierced the skin, then that's going to be vector borne. So all these types of things, they add a level of risk to us when we're doing our job. So I've already talked about a couple of these things here, so no need to belabor that. Just needle sticks is always one of the hot topic things when we talk about possibilities of infections. So I wanted to look up some statistics when it comes to when it came to needle sticks, and what I found was actually pretty interesting, and it lends itself to the conversations that have been had over the years. So when we look at data that talks about the risk of developing a disease from an accidental needle stick, and I looked at first responders and nursing staff, we saw that there was a 0.3% of infection rate when it came to HIV positive sources when somebody got stuck by a needle accidentally. When we're looking at hepatitis B, it went from 2.6% up to 7% when it came to infection and developing the actual disease. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is that for a long time we've had this conversation that if you got stuck, then you immediately, you had the disease. If you got a little blood on you from a patient because you were doing your job, and they got a little blood on you, you just thought that you had the whatever disease they had on them. That's not necessarily true. There is a chance that you can have those, but the chances are very low. And why is that? It's simply because there is a gestation period. Just because you're exposed to something does not mean that you immediately have it. These things have to grow. They have to set roots inside of your body, inside of your cells. So the biggest thing that we can do, and I've said this many, many times, is that we need to make sure that we are practicing um, good hygiene, very good hygiene. So when you think that you might get exposure or something like that, yes, we need to follow our protocols. You inform those who you need to inform. You go through the steps that you need to, but you also need to simply wash your hands. Wash whatever part of the body that was affected with it with good soap and water. Change the clothes. Make sure that you have your PPE on. All that kind of stuff like that really, really helps. It helps to um, slow down the process and halt it in many cases. Now, let's talk about the whole sanitizing stuff. So when we look at it, we're looking at an argument between alcohol, gel, alcohol, liquid. I'm sorry, guys, I had a long shift. The alcohol gel versus soap and water. Which one is better? Soap and water statistically has been shown to be better. Now, that's not to say that the foam is not good. It is good because it can clean and it can kill any of the bacteria or any of the virus that may be living on the surface of your skin or whatever. It kills that, pretty much immediately once it comes in contact with it. But where the gel and the foam falter is going to be with the spores. So some of the bacteria and some of the things like that they have their active members, but then they have the other members that are living basically in an egg, for lack of a better term. They're just sitting back. They haven't developed enough to pop out and become a full blown bacterial virus. They're just there. The alcohol does not penetrate those egg sacs, for lack of a better term again. But what happens is when you wash your hands with soap and water, you have a process that's called saponification. So basically, when the bubbles, because we're supposed to wash our hands for at least 20 seconds, get a good lather. When those bubbles form up and they in your hands or whatever, they actually form around the spores and the little egg sacs and the bacteria that haven't started moving. It forms around that, and when you rinse your hands off, that stuff actually just it gets pushed down the drain. So that's why, statistically speaking, soap and water is more effective than the foam. Now, out in the field, we're not going to have access to soap and water immediately all the time, but we all have the hand sprays and stuff like that. So we still want to use that, but as soon as we can, we want to go ahead and get some soap and water too. All right. So every business has a ECP or exposure control plan, and we have one with us. It's on the DMS, and it shows you everything that we're supposed to do. These are the elements that are required to be in your infection control. I'm sorry, exposure control plan. So that's anything you need that pertains to that is going to be in there. All right. Now let's talk about how some ways that we can control exposures. One of the best ways to control exposures is going to be basically to treat everything like it is infected. Okay, everything. If they start bleeding on you, I don't know you, so I'm going to think that you have the worst disease in the world. I want to get these clothes off. I want to go ahead and get this stuff squared away so that I don't run the risk of it germinating on me and things like that. So that's what I want to do. The next thing, and I've said it a few times already, but clean up, proper cleanup, decon, all that kind of stuff like that. That's what we need to be doing. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. We don't take the time like we should all the time to make sure that we are protected. Okay, I know that we need to. I know that it's what we should be doing, but we don't always do it, and that's just a fact of life. So I want to encourage everybody to after this. I want to encourage you to just start to take your health. Take it in your hands and just be more proactive with it. And anytime you feel like you might have had any type of questionable contact with anything or stuff like that, go ahead and be proactive. Change your clothes, take a shower, wash your hands, anything like that, because that really helps. Now, let's talk about one that nobody wants to deal with, but it is something that it's one of the times I think where we're at our most vulnerable when we're talking about exposures, and that is childbirth. Now, if you've never had the pleasure of helping childbirth out in the field, you don't know what you're missing. Okay, it is a very interesting process, and it is a process that can leave you very dirty, for lack of a better term. So when we're talking about childbirth, there's a lot of fluids that comes out, and we just learned that bodily fluids, is a transfer medium when it comes to infectious diseases. So let's talk about some of the things that you can find in those bodily fluids. One of the ones that I was able to find was in the amniotic fluid. You can find diseases like herpes, hepatitis B, HIV, just to name a few. And we're supposed to have on our gown, we're supposed to have on our gloves, mask, all that kind of stuff like that. And if you've done a few childbirths, or at least been a part of the process, sometimes we go into high gear and we don't put everything on that we're supposed to. I want to encourage you guys, now that you know that things like herpes, hepatitis B, HIV, those things that could be living in those fluids, I want to encourage you guys to slow down for a second and go ahead and put the full garb on. Now, if let's say for whatever reason, things happened, you just didn't put on the whole outfit, the whole pregnancy outfit, you just didn't do it. What do I need to do? As soon as you can, you need to go ahead and take those clothes off. That's any clothes that have come in contact with the amniotic fluid. You need to take those off and bag them up. Now on this picture here, you see they have a red bag, but honestly, any type of garbage bag will work. You need to bag those up and keep those away from the cab of the truck. Keep them away from other people, and we need to go ahead and get those things cleaned as soon as possible. Just because you don't know what you're carrying. And I want to stress to you that we do not want to bring this stuff into the cab of the fire truck, because that's basically our mobile office. Um, how many times have we been on wrecks or anything, and you've had some type of body fluid, blood or something on the bottom of your shoe, and you walk into the cab of the fire truck, and now whatever was on the bottom of your shoe it's on the floor of the fire truck. And we all keep our fire gear pretty much on the floor when we're traveling and stuff like that. So there is a big chance that this stuff can be transmitted to you indirectly from these possibly infected surfaces. So we got to make sure that we're taking this seriously and doing the best that we can. All right. When it comes to controlling exposures, there have been lots of advances made in the tools that we use. One of the ones that is actually pretty cool, and we've all had experience with it at least once, was the disappearing needle. Once the needle plunger reaches a certain point, that needle shoots back into the actual body of the syringe, and now you don't really have to worry about accidental sticks. We have our Lord, our sharps container. We have that, and that helps protect us from accidental sticks if we use them. And then, of course, we said it a few times. We got the hand hygiene, soap and water. So all these things like here, using the tools that the department gives us, using just good. And I hate to say common sense, but just using good reason. All those things like that really help us to control our possibilities of exposure. All right, so here's some examples of PPE. Don't really need to stay on that one. Just want to encourage you guys, anytime you're dealing with a patient with any signs or symptoms of COVID, we really want to try to cover them up with some type of mask to keep those droplets out of the way. And of course, if if your patient is having breathing difficulty, we really don't want to put a cloth mask on their face. Let's go ahead and put an N90, I'm sorry, not an N95, a non-rebreather on them. That'll help them to breathe, but it also keeps what's inside of them and not on us. So all those things right there are very, very helpful. All right. We're still talking about the exposure and controlling that. And here's what our employer's responsibility are. So they need to perform the hazard assessments, which they have. They need to provide appropriate PPE, and they've done that in droves. We can get an N95 mask or a patient mask pretty readily, so that's great. This takes care of your training, so they're trying to give you guys as much update information as they possibly can when it comes to this stuff, so that we're all aware. We're maintaining and replacing the PPE. The fire department is doing all this type of stuff here, so we're really doing good when it comes to this. I have had the honor to teach all throughout the county, and I have been to many rural and small fire departments, and I can definitely say that there's not many places in this area that's on the same level as us. So we are really fortunate to have what we do. All right, so we're still talking about this. One of the big things that we can do. All right, so we're back. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, so hopefully things stay together and it didn't mess up too bad. But let's keep rolling on through here. We're almost done with this one. So when we're looking at controlling exposures, we're still talking about the simple things that we can do. And one of the simplest things we can do is just clean up. Man, I think that we could hold a whole class on station cleaning and things like that if we really wanted to. But, not getting on a soapbox or nothing like that. But one of the things that I think that we all need to be honest with ourselves about and finally take ownership in is that, especially during the COVID crisis that we're going through, where things that we touch can be infected very easily. we all have to do better. We all have to do better when it comes to cleaning our stations, cleaning our equipment, all these things like this, because the cat's out the bag. All right, we've had exposures. It is what it is. Now, what do we do with that? We all have to start taking our own health into our own hands, being responsible for it, and we got to do our part. Everybody should be doing their part. So it could be something as simple as changing the towels out of the cabinet where we put where you put your glasses at. When's the last time that's been done? Or simply cleaning out the utensil carrier in the drawer. Just simple things like that, because we never know. We never know what has what on what surface, but what we do know is that we have had incidences with this, and we all want to stay healthy. We all want to stay at the job that we love. So let's all do our part with just some of the simple things like good housekeeping. We've already talked about some of this stuff here, but again, PPE is your best friend. PPE is your best friend, and we need to wear that when we're trying to clean up on like some obvious things. If we're trying to clean up blood or things like that, definitely you want to put on some PPE with that. But if we're just wiping down the table or whatnot, just wash your hands, after you do it. Um, when we're looking at this, when we're talking about cleanup and decon, again, let's look at it from the perspective of COVID. What do we know about COVID? We know that it can be transmitted through respiratory, so we know that. And we also know that it can be transmitted on infected surfaces. So we got two variables right there that we can do a lot about. So when we're looking at it from that perspective, we have to start asking ourselves simple things like, what's our fogging schedule at the station? At Station 41, we do it every Friday. Whichever shift is on Friday, that's when we do it. Your shift can be different. We do it once a week, but there's nothing wrong with having a discussion with the BCs and with safety and all the stuff about doing it more often if you guys feel that it's necessary. Um, what's your wipe down routine? What's the schedule? What surfaces do you wipe down? Do you only wipe down the surfaces on fridge and stove day, or is this something that you do every time you come in, twice a week? You see what I'm saying? We have to start thinking about things like that, because this stuff holds real consequences if we get lax. So I want to encourage everybody to be proactive. Be proactive. Get out there, and even if nobody else is doing it, if nobody else is doing it for whatever reason, I want you to do it. Okay. And I know it's not fair, but we're trying to make sure everybody stays healthy. So be proactive with your own health, with your own safety. And when you see something that needs to be cleaned, let's go ahead and clean it and do better about that. The last thing about the whole deconning and cleanup is, uh, are we holding one another accountable for doing their part? There's always a shift, and it's always the shift that you're not on. But there's always a shift that doesn't clean, or there's always a shift that doesn't do this or that do that. When it comes to things like the COVID, we have to push these things aside. Okay, it doesn't matter who's not doing what's not doing what. That doesn't matter. What does matter is that we're holding each other accountable and encouraging everybody to do their part in the station. We all live there. That's our house for 24 hours, every 3 days. So let's try to take care of one another. Okay, we've already talked about this. The only thing that I want to add to it is I just want to encourage you guys to keep some trash bags in the truck somewhere with you. We like to keep them in the back near the cooler, so that should you ever get any type of exposure, you can go ahead and put that stuff in there, and you don't have to worry about possibly contaminating the rest of the crew inside of the cab. All right, and again, this one right here, it highlights what I've been saying. Please, please, please don't bring the contaminated stuff into the cab of the truck. And going just one step further than that, don't bring it into the locker room. And if you have to, I get it, there are circumstances where things, it's just unavoidable. But if you have to on either one of those, as soon as you are able to, go ahead and decon and clean the areas where that soil stuff could have come in contact with. Again, guys, our health, our safety is relying on each other. I know we like to think that we're that we're an entity by ourselves, but in this job, the person to my left, I'm relying on them just like the person to my right is relying on me. So we have to do our part. So please don't bring this stuff into the areas, but if you have to, please clean up after it. Okay, so we're doing a training here, so we really don't need to go over all this stuff right here. We've already talked about it. Just know that this is an annual thing, and this is something that as new information comes available, is always added into the training. So every year you're going to see something just slightly different. The Hep B vaccine, were all offered it when we first started out, and that's just part of the mandate that they have to do. If you've never had a hepatitis B protection, I really want to encourage you to research it and then seek it out because, like I said earlier, my sister, she passed away. Gosh, I think it's been maybe 10, 15 years ago now. I'm not even sure. She passed away quite a while ago from one of the hepatitises. And I can tell you from personal experience that that is not a disease that you want to deal with because you start to see the layers of the person that you once knew as your loved one. They slowly start to disappear as your systems start to shut down as a result of your liver being so negatively impacted. So again, I just want to encourage you guys to take that and to be proactive with your health. Excuse me. I apologize. Okay. Currently, we don't have any vaccines for hepatitis C. At one point in time, a few years ago, there was kind of some anecdotal data out there saying that there were things that were showing promise, but I haven't seen anything come out as of late about it. And I've already talked about the pill that they have for the HIV right now. Again, that's called Big Tarvy. They have commercials out everywhere about it, and again, I just think that shows an amazing amount of growth that we have as a nation, as a people, as a human race. I think that's just amazing that we've been able to move beyond the how and the who to now to the solution, or at least to making things better. So I think that's really cool. Okay. Um, this right here is pretty much self-explanatory. And then just in case if you were wondering, OPIM stands for other potentially infectious materials. All right. So OPIM is other potentially infectious materials. We've already talked about how exposures can occur. It's going to be some type of open source, whether it be a mucous membrane, a open wound. It can even be something as small as just a little paper cut on your fingers, or if you're like most firemen and women, they all have part-time jobs, and most of them are labor intensive. So we all have nicks and scratches and cuts all on our hands and things like that. So even those things right there are potential infection sites. So just be careful. I've already talked about this. Soap and water, soap and water, soap and water. This is so good. This is one of our best line of defenses. They've done studies on this and they've shown that soap and water is better at getting rid of diseases and things like that on surfaces than just the alcohol gel. Nothing wrong with the gel or the foam. Nothing wrong with it at all if that's all you have. But as soon as you're able to, go ahead and do a good thorough scrubbing with soap and water. And with that being said, I just thought about this. Make sure that you know how to wash your hands. At the college, we actually spend a little bit of time and we teach our students how to wash their hands now, especially with the COVID, because a lot of people they just go in there, put a little soap on their hands, quick, one, two, tie my shoe, scrub, and then they're done. But it takes a little bit. You need to work up a lather, get a good foam in there, and take your time because the longer you scrub your hands, the more effective it is, and the more spores and eggs, for lack of a better term, are agitated and brought up into, or higher up on the surface, so that the saponification and the bubbles can grab hold to it. So just make sure that hey, you can have hand washing practice at the station one day as a class. I'm not sure. Actually, you know what? That would be a pretty cool thing to do because not everybody washes their hands. So anyway, you see what the rest is on that one. So moving on. Okay, what do we do if an exposure happens? All right, the number one thing that you can, well, I'm not gonna say number one thing because that's not number one thing. Um, a very important thing, there we go. A very important thing that you can do or that you should do is that you need to report the exposure immediately or as soon as possible. Okay, and the reason being is because God forbid something happened down the line. If you didn't report it like you should be, should you ever need to do a workers' comp case or get some assistance, whatever, that can really hinder the whole process because you never reported it. So this is more about making sure that you cover your own butt and make sure that you are getting things in motion so that should you ever need um, to utilize things later, like the workers' comp or something like that, then it'll be something that you can do. You also want to report it immediately or as soon as possible because there are lots of wheels and cogs that need to get moving and working behind the scenes once an exposure happens. Reports need to be filed. People need to be notified. We need to get you possibly to the doctor. All these types of things need to happen. And the department wants these things to happen because the department wants to take care of you. Don't make no mistake about it. Department wants to take care of it. That's why we have these GOGs. That's why we have all these things in place so that should something happen to one of our brothers and sisters, we can, things can be taken care of. But it can't happen if they don't know about it. So don't let pride get in your way, and don't worry about somebody Monday morning quarterbacking you because you got an accidental exposure, for whatever reason. Because a lot of times we don't say things because we're embarrassed or we're afraid of, not afraid, but we're concerned about what somebody else on the department may think. Don't worry about that. Take care of your family, take care of yourself, and you take care of your family by taking care of yourself, and report these things so that things can happen. All right. Okay. Let's see here. All this right here is pretty much self-explanatory. When an exposure does happen, these things are going to be are some of the things that's going to happen behind the scenes. They're going to find out what the route of exposure was, how that happened, why that happened. They're also going to try to find the source. Now that's a whole different topic right there when it comes to the source because it all depends on the circumstances. Was the person intoxicated? Was it in a wreck? Was it a Jane Doe, John Doe? Lots of things need to happen in order for us to even figure out the source because then we got to get samples from them. So again, there's a lot of moving parts that a lot of people don't realize happen. You're gonna get tested for some things. Some of the serious things like the HBV, the hepatitis B. You're gonna get the HIV test, and I'm sure you can get some other tests if you ask, and I'm sure they'll figure out some ways to handle that one. After you get all that done, next is they have to be proactive and they have to put you on prophylaxis. So basically, they're trying to protect your loved ones from a possible exposure from you that you may not even realize that you have. So we're talking about no unprotected sex. We're talking about possible antibiotic cocktails that are going to be putting you on all these types of things like this just to make sure that you don't accidentally infect somebody else. Because it's one thing for you to be infected, but then it's a whole nother thing for you to accidentally infect a loved one, especially without you even realizing it. So after all those things right there, and it's not necessarily after, but it can definitely be throughout. This is a biggie. This is a biggie, and this is why I put the stars right here because I wanted to camp out on this one for just a second. Counseling. Guys, you got to understand when we're talking about diseases, some things just can't be done away with a shot or a pill. All right, let's just be honest. Some things can't. And even though I said that there's a 0.3% chance on an accidental stick for you to develop like HIV or something like that, it is still greater than 0%. So there's a small chance that that could happen. And should that ever happen, God forbid it, but if that ever happens, what now? The emotional toll of a negative diagnosis can be absolutely devastating and it can be incredible. I mean, guys, you got to understand we're talking about you're going to be shifting from one reality into a completely new paradigm that you don't even that you have no reference for. Okay, we're talking about some at one point in time you were able to we'll say you was able to drink after anybody you wanted to. You was able to have a cut and not really worry about it. You was able to have intimate relations with whomever you wanted to, and now you're going into a phase where now that may not be possible anymore because of the threat. So that takes a big toll, okay? And I just want you guys to understand that nobody, I don't care how tough you are, nobody is immune to this. This is going to hit you. Things are going to start working in your brain, and at some point in time, the reality of a new uh, life is going to hit you, and to some people, that's going to be really hard. Okay, don't let pride prevent you from seeking out counseling. It is okay to be afraid. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be lost. But what's not okay is staying there. Now, in this department, we have well over 500, some 550, maybe 600 brothers and sisters here. There is no reason whatsoever that you should ever have to face anything alone, ever, ever, especially something like this. So I want to encourage you and I'm being heartfelt here. I want to encourage you, if you ever come up against anything like this or anything that you just need somebody, okay, you feel alone, you just need somebody, please reach out. The department offers great people when it comes to like peer counseling. We have a lot of great people out there, but if you don't feel comfortable talking to them, then for God's sakes, reach out to me. Okay, I may not even know you, but I do know that you're a human being. I know that you're a person, and I know what it's like to feel like your back is against the wall. So I just want to encourage you guys to reach out, and we'll make it through this together. We really will. Um, Last but not least, then after everything is said and done, you get your evaluation, and then we know what we're going to have to do from that point. Okay. Whew, that was a lot of stuff. All right. We got a quick little pop quiz. Pretty sure y'all have seen these things before. I actually don't even know if I'm supposed to talk through this, so I'm just going to look at this one, and we'll see what we're going to do here. Kind of flying blind just a little bit. So let's do the knowledge check. Bloodborne pathogens can be transmitted by do 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 do. I'm pretty sure I don't have to do the whole thing on this one, but the answer is D, all of the above. Next one. Employees should use PPE when do 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 do. Yeah, this one right here, it's a state test. Anytime you see all of the above, all of the above. There you go. Moving on. Which of the following is an example of a work practice control? I almost messed that one up there. Is it going to be spill kits, accessible hand washing stations, proper decon of spill areas, or red hazardous waste bags? Do 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 do. See, I had to look a little bit longer that one. And the answer is going to be C. All right. Which of the following is a standard precaution for workers exposed to bloodborne pathogens? Are we going to treat all liquids as hazardous for HIV? Are we going to treat all blood and bodily fluids of patients as potentially infectious materials? That one sounds a lot better. Are we going to test all blood and unknown bodily fluids for HIV after spills? Is that practical? Or D, are we going to label unknown liquids with hazard signs? I think the best one's going to be B. We're going to treat all blood and bodily fluids of patients as potentially infectious diseases. And there's reasons why the other ones don't work. First off, you can't get HIV from all liquids from body. If somebody spits, I'm pretty sure you can't get HIV from that. That's through blood, actually. You know what? I just jumped out there. I'm going to find that out now, but I'm pretty sure that saliva does not transmit HIV. All right, hepatitis B is an inflammation of which body organ? We talked about that one earlier, and remember, it affects the same organ that alcoholics have problems with. Do 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 do. It is D, the liver. How many more of these are there? Okay. In the event of an exposure incident, which of the following actions should be taken first? We talked about this, and this, like I said, this was like the theme of the day. So I don't even have to wait on this one. We want to wash the area thoroughly. All right, which of the following actions can help prevent exposure to bloodborne pathogens? What did we say our strategy was for state tests? D, all of the above. We want to wear gloves, wear goggles, and wash hands. I get it. The goggles definitely make us look kind of weird, but I got glasses, so I look weird anyway. But nonetheless, it's out there for you. Want to encourage you guys to at least wear. You could even do the safety glasses. They got some nice looking safety glasses out there now, so you can be stylish and safe at the same time. Okay, a vaccine is only available for which of the following major bloodline pathogen viruses? All right, which one? We don't have a vaccine for a few of these. And the answer is B, hepatitis B. Okay, which of the following are potential routes of entry for bloodborne pathogens? Mucous membranes of the eyes, nose, and mouth. That's a biggie when it comes to COVID because they keep telling us don't touch your face, leave your face alone. And if you have young kids, my God, you know how frustrating it is to tell your child 57 times an hour, stop touching your face, stop touching your face. So we know that one's there. Non-intact skin, it's kind of a no-brainer. We've been talking about that. Open wounds, things like that. Penetration by a contaminated sharp object that was vector-borne. So all those fit the bill. So all of the above. All right. Congratulations. You passed the knowledge check. Let's talk real quick, and I do mean real quick, about HIPAA. HIPAA is something that the name just doesn't make sense to me. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Okay. But nonetheless, HIPAA is very important because HIPAA saves our butts, and we need to make sure that we understand HIPAA. HIPAA was basically invented to help protect people's information, and it helped to basically give people, give them privacy. If we want to be real about it, it's to give them privacy because everybody don't need to know everybody's business. So that's the simplistic version of why HIPAA rules were invented, is to protect the privacy of the people. Now, what's on the slide, it gets a little bit more in depth. The patient has a right to access their health info. They have the right to request to change their health info. I'm sorry. They have the right to restrict information, and we've seen on the doctor forms when you do stuff like that, it says who can call in and get your test results or things like that. And they also have the right to request accountability for disclosures. So HIPAA provides all that. Okay. This thing comes in. I didn't make this slide, so it comes in. Oh, sorry. Okay. What just happened? All right. I don't know what just happened. I think I just skipped the slide. But to wrap it all up in a nutshell, basically, if the person does not have a legal reason or a medical reason to know information about a patient, then we can't give it to them. That's all protected by HIPAA. Now, what we can do is that we can give some nondescript information or non-identifying information over the radio and things like that when necessary, but we can't give any type of identifying information like that because it's just not it's not secure, so anybody could be listening to it. So we have to be very careful with that. All right. Let's see here. We need patients to give permission before we can give information to others on their behalf. And when it comes to that, that's not really in our ballpark because we don't really give out information. We don't really do anything, on that side of the fence. So just keep in mind, long story short, just keep in mind if the person who's requesting information does not have a valid legal reason or a valid medical reason for requesting the information or position to request the information, then we cannot give it to them. Okay. Let's see here. So you see this slide right here. While on the call of the clinic, you saw your child's teacher in the waiting room. You can't tell anybody that you saw them at the waiting room. It's just that simple. Keep your business, and their business, their business. All right. And here's last but not least, and this is going with the, I guess this is, I think this is more than just HIPAA, but just keep in mind when we're interacting with the public, we're interacting with them on a professional, in a professional capacity. Okay, there's nothing wrong with being nice to people. There's nothing wrong with doing excellent customer service, like I've always asked, encouraged everybody to do. But there is something wrong when we start social media stalking people. Okay, so you're running a super razor thin edge when you start trying to befriend people on social media, and you start doing things like that. So it's just better to not do that. Okay, keep things professional and just roll on with life. So no Facebook stalking, no social media befriending or anything like that to any patients that we have. All right, we made it. My goodness, we did make it. I do apologize. Things a little bit kind of uh, disarray. Kind of got this at the last second, so I'm just trying to do a good job for you guys. I appreciate y'all hanging in there with me. The next one should be a little bit better. I'm gonna try to make it better. Love you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.